Hi, this is part 3 of rebuilding our 1948 NuTone CH4000 chiming clock. In this part, we're going to service the Telechron gear drive assembly. In part 3, you saw me remove the motor from the back of the clock assembly, and I took the Telechron gear drive assembly out of the motor frame. So what is this exactly? Well, this is a sealed unit. So this cannot be opened up by regular human beings, not even me. Would never risk opening it up. They were not designed to be opened up. What's inside of here? As near as I can tell, in this end, in the little hub, there's some kind of little motor assembly, because when this is inserted in the frame of the motor where the magnetic field is, the magnetic field makes the part inside here rotate. Connected to that, inside the large part of it, is a series of little tiny gears. And the gears regulate the speed and also the amount of torque or twisting force that it has. And ultimately, here on the back side, you have the output gear. So what happens to these? Over time, these become harder and harder to make turn. And sometimes they will freeze up and not turn at all. And that's because when these were manufactured, inside the unit was either some type of grease or some type of oil. I'm not sure exactly, and I don't know how much it changed over time and so forth. The grease or oil that's inside of it, it becomes hard and gummy and sticky, and it doesn't allow the gears to rotate freely, so the little tiny motor assembly in the end can't turn the gears properly, and it just sort of sits there and vibrates, and it doesn't really do anything. Since these are sealed units and you can't really open them up without destroying them, you have to figure out a way to service them to make them turn freely again, and that also for ones that do spin but become noisy, it helps quiet them down some. So how do we do this? The method that I prefer to use is we're going to heat this up. How are we going to heat it up? Well, you're going to see that in a minute. The point is that if you heat this up, this whole entire unit, all of the metal parts will expand, because metal parts expand when they get heated. Once it's expanded and it's up to temperature, we're going to take it out of the heat. As it begins to cool down, we're going to take a little bit of 3-in-1 oil, which is my preferred oil, and we're going to put a couple drops right here on the gear. Now the gear sits in this little brass well. And the brass well is actually to orientate this into the back of the clockwork frame so it fits in properly and the gears mesh correctly. But it does provide a little well right here for the oil to build up in. And since this is the output shaft of the unit with the shaft that the gear is on, there obviously has to be a little tiny space between the output shaft and the brass well, otherwise it wouldn't turn. So everything heats up and expands. You put a couple drops of 3-in-1 oil here, and then you wait. And as it begins to cool down, all of the metal parts will begin to shrink. And as it shrinks, it creates a little bit of a suction, and it will pull the 3-in-1 oil out of the reservoir here, out of the well, and pull it inside. And you have to, when you're doing this, you have to sit there and watch it, because you have to keep adding a couple drops of oil over and over and over and over again to get it to draw in as much as you possibly can. Heating it up will melt and help restore the oil or grease that's inside of it to a large extent. But adding the 3-in-1 oil also acts sort of as a thinner for it, because if you look on it, it says 3-in-1 oil. It lubricates, penetrates rust, and it cleans. It sort of thins out the original oil or grease that's inside of it, and then when you run this, the little gears turn and it mixes it all together, and it makes the grease or oil that's inside a little bit thinner, and that makes it all run better. So it's a really good way. It may sound a little on the hokey side, but it's not, because I've done hundreds of these, and except for one that I did recently that I could not get to turn, it wouldn't turn at all when I started, and I did the heating and oil application. I did it 3 times, and after 3 times it still wouldn't turn. So that one was replaced with a replacement unit that I had. But for the most part, all of these that I've done, I've had people send me clocks, and I've had people send me door chimes that use these, And every single one that I've done has worked when I'm finished with it. It just seems like a really good way to go. In fact, it's a standard thing we do on all NuTone chimes and all NuTone clocks that use these. We service the Telechron assembly this way. So how are we going to heat this up? Well, we're going to take it over to our shop toaster oven, and I'm going to show you that in a second, and we're going to heat it up. The thing you're going to need to do this is, of course, you need your Telechron gear drive assembly. You need your 3-in-1 oil. And you need to have it ready, because when you take this out, it starts to cool down immediately, and you have to be ready to do it. The other thing you're going to need is you need a little piece of tin foil like this. This is just aluminum foil. And I just sort of form it into a little bit of a cup, and this is going to sit in there like that when it goes in the toaster oven, because it's not so much for the toaster oven thing or the heating up thing, it's for when you take it out. Because when you start adding the oil, you don't want the oil to get all over the workbench and make a big mess, and then you have to clean it up. So this will catch anything that might spill out. And the other reason that we don't use the metal cups, you've seen the metal cups in lots of videos, I'm a big fan of the metal cups. I don't use these because I don't want to throw one of these away every time I do one of those. So the aluminum foil, it's just a little tiny piece, and you get done and you crumple it up and throw it away, and that's good. So let's go over to the toaster oven and get that going, because this takes a little bit of time to do. All right, so this is our shop toaster oven. It's just sort of your general purpose run-of-the-mill toaster oven from the 90s, I think. And having a heat source in the shop is always a really good thing, because you never know when you have to heat something up. And no, for all you who are thinking, we don't make hot pockets in it. We just heat up motor drive assemblies and other stuff like that. So it's sitting in here on its piece of aluminum foil. We're going to close it up, and what we're going to do is we're going to put it on fan bake, and we're going to set it to 300 degrees, and we're going to turn it on, and it's going to run at 300 degrees for 30 minutes. And then I'm going to ramp it up to 325 degrees. See, it's in there cooking away already. For another 25 minutes, and then it's going to come out. So in approximately 1 hour, I'll be back. Oh, and I do set a timer in the shop to keep track of this so we don't forget. So I'll see you in an hour. I am back. An hour has passed since you saw me put this in the toaster oven, and now we're going to add the oil. So what you want to watch is right here where the gear sits inside the brass well. And this is as close as I can zoom in, so you're going to have to watch really carefully. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a couple drops to start with, like that. And now you have to wait, because as it begins to cool, it will slowly suck the oil inside the Telechron gear drive assembly. And if you watch really carefully, right here, you'll see it disappear. It takes a little bit of time. So we'll wait for the first go around, and then I'm going to actually record it for the entire length of time that it will pull oil in. How long does that last? Well, it could be anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes or so. Eventually it will cool down enough that it won't make any more suction, and then when you put oil, it just sits there and sits there and sits there. So that's when you're pretty much done. It takes a little bit of time for the first couple drops to disappear, because the unit has to start to cool down enough to create the suction to pull it in. So we'll just sit here and wait, because that's what the NuTone guy does. And I have my magnifiers on, so if I look carefully, I can watch and see. When I do this on the workbench and I'm repairing somebody's door chime, I will put this off to the side, and as I work on the chime base, I'll keep an eye on it. You can usually see when the oil disappears, because the overhead lights cause little reflections in the oil, and when you glance over, you'll notice that they're gone, and that's when you got to add some more. So it takes a few seconds, and this is very much like watching paint dry or the grass grow or something like that. So we'll just have to sit here and wait. See how exciting it is to be a NuTone service center guy? This is about as exciting as it gets some days. I think it's very slowly starting to disappear. Still a little bit left. I think it's starting to go though. and it's just about gone. See how slow it is? When it begins to cool down, the next applications often go faster. So I'm going to hold this. I'm going to bend the foil down in the back just a little bit because it makes it easier to add the oil, and I want to jostle it around so then you can't see. So I'm going to add another drop, and now the well is filled up again. It can be kind of deceiving because it will get pulled in very slowly, especially in the beginning. Sometimes when you do this, on the first go around, it will hardly draw in any oil at all, and sometimes even none. And I think that's because the grease or the oil that's inside may be really, really, really thick, and it doesn't open up the space around the motor shaft or the output shaft enough, and it has a hard time trying to pull it in. In those cases, what we do is we repeat the process. I try to get as much oil as I can into it, and then clean it off, wipe off the oil, and then put it back in the toaster oven and do the cycle again, and then try again. And usually the second time it will be more successful. Sometimes I've done it as many as 3 times to try to get it the best that I possibly can. So you never know. And this one was picked, well, it's not random because I'm restoring a CH4000, but it's the original one out of the CH4000, and it is what it is. So we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. It's going very, very slowly, much slower than average. This would be typical because I decided to do this in a video. And yes, I will show this video even though it's not going as per normal. It's actually going very slowly, but that's the luck of the draw. By now, I would have expected it to have at least 2 or 3 applications of oil, and it would have pulled it all inside. This one doesn't seem to be doing that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put one more drop. I think it's going in very, very slowly because the amount that the well will hold did diminish a little bit, but not a whole lot. So what I'm going to do with this, because I know that you're all intensely interested in how this turns out, but in the end, we'll have spoilers here, it'll turn out just fine, because they always do. Except for the one that didn't, but that was only one out of many hundreds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit here and do this until it cools all the way off, and then test it and see how it runs. And if I'm not satisfied with it, then I'm going to repeat the process again, but I'm not going to make you sit through that because really what's the point? This is the fundamental way that you service the Telechron gear drive assembly. And if you're working on a NuTone Chime or a NuTone Clock, because these are used in both of those, and these were used in one form or another between about 1939 until the end of around 1995, 1997, depending on the model of Chime. So after that, then they went to electronic boards and they didn't have motor drive assemblies anymore. See, it's really not pulling much in, so that's kind of interesting. I don't think it's going to do much more. One of the things I noticed on this, which is interesting, I'm going to dab out the oil because it does get kind of messy. And let's see if it's still hot. It's still a little bit warm. So we'll get the little pliers here, or maybe I can just turn it around. That makes it easier. So if I turn it around, I notice right here, which I think you can see, yeah, right here, there's a little brass screw. Now I've worked on a lot of these, and the little brass screw seems to have a little bit of oil or something dripping out of it. And I have never ever seen one of these with a little brass screw before. And I have a feeling that they weren't made that way. I've never seen one that has that. And it's a really, really tiny screw. And I'm not sure. Yeah, that'll fit. If we unscrew this, kind of hard for you to see. It's loose, but it doesn't seem to want to come out. So let's try it this way. We'll take our cutters here. We'll just put them underneath the head of the screw. And that sort of pulls it up a little bit. And then we'll rotate it. And see if it unscrews. And yes, it does. So, it's a little tiny machine screw that's somewhat stripped out. And I would say, judging by what this looks like, that this is not at all original. I have a feeling that somebody drilled a hole in it. And if they drilled a hole in it, the only reason you would do that would be to squirt something inside. Got to hold it in a rag because it's too hot. And if we take our pliers and you very carefully hold it and put the pliers on the gear and turn the gear, it actually does turn. And when it turns, you can hear the gears inside turning. So do you remember when you were a kid and you had those little friction toy cars and you would pull them, but you'd wind them up and wind them up and wind them up on the floor, and they had a little flywheel and gears inside, then you let it go and go shooting across the floor and go under the refrigerator and your mom would get mad? That's what this sounds like when it turns. So I have a feeling that at some point somebody drilled a hole in it. And if they drilled a hole in it, my guess is they did it to put something inside, and that might be some kind of oil. The other thing we can do is we'll take a little piece of this, because it's a really, really tiny hole. We'll take this little piece of wire here, and we'll use it like a dipstick. Poke it inside, try not to lose it inside, and then we'll pull it out. And indeed, it's shiny and a little bit black, which tells me that there's stuff in there. A little bit. So, in this particular case, we're going to try something different, because this is not standard. You're never going to find this. And also, I don't recommend that you drill a hole in your Telechron gear drive assembly, because the problem with that, in my opinion, could be that when you drill the hole, you're going to get metal pieces inside the gears, and then if it gets jammed in between two teeth of the gears, then you're going to have a problem because it's not going to turn, and there's no way to take the whole thing apart, and then it might be shot. So don't do this at home, okay? I didn't do this. This is the way it came. Whether it's any good or not, it's probably okay, but I'm curious to see what we might find inside. So let me get something and I'll be right back. So what we're going to do is, what we have here is a syringe. Just a plastic syringe with a little metal tip on it. It's not the kind that you jab into people. It's the kind you put oil and stuff in and then you put it into. There are some NuTone assemblies that the gear drives have oil ports, and you take the screw out and then you can suck out all the old oil and put in new oil, and this is how you fill it up. See, we got everything here. So if we put this in here, I don't know if it's long enough to see if we get anything out of it or not. Like this. Pull it up. Nothing. So you can tell because it's not creating any suction. So maybe if we roll it down like this a little bit, so whatever's in it rolls down more towards the bottom. Nope. Doesn't seem to have anything much in it. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our 3-in-1 oil, and we'll try not to get it all over the workbench here, and we're going to put some inside the syringe. How much? Oh, I don't know. It looks like it's about 0.5 milliliters. Well, no, it's 0.25 milliliters. It's not very full. And we're going to inject some into the little hole. Like that. And that went in pretty well. So now we're going to do it one more time. This is not a standard operation here. I have never had one like this before. We'll do a little more. You don't want to put too much. I'm sort of basing this on how many little drops we normally would put in. Alright, like that. So we put some inside. And now we're going to put our little screw back in. The little screw, it tightens down some. But as you saw, when I took it out, when it was heated up, there was a little bit running out. So it doesn't seal real well. So probably what I'll do after I test this, and before I put the motor all back together, I'm going to spin it here. That's pretty good. After I put it all back together and run it for a while, make sure it works well, I'll probably clean all of this really thoroughly to get any of the oily residue off of it, and then I'll put a little dab of clear, like conformal coating over it, which is what you put on circuit boards, but it's what I have, and that'll sort of seep in underneath and seal around it, and it's sort of like a clear plastic coating a little bit. It'll be a little blob of it, and that probably will help keep it from leaking. So this is a non-standard Telechron gear drive servicing effort here. Normally you heat it up, you put the oil, and it works pretty well. I'm going to run this for a while, and based on what it sounds like, I may heat it up and do the oil thing again. Not sure. I have a feeling though it's probably fine. If the hole is not standard, which it's not, then my guess is someone's worked on this before in the past, and this was their way to replace the oil that was inside with something else. So that's it. See, you never know what you're going to find when you work on something from 1948. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.